another of green and purple sulfur bacteria oxygenating ocean and air, thus to photosynthesis directly from water, as in blue-green algae fossilized in sediments more than 3 billion years old. The buttressing of particles from the antinomies of energy, of atoms into molecules, molecules into adaptive polymers, polymers into cells, stromatolite banks of oxygen releases, culminates in nucleated cells, eukaryotes, passing genetic variation by sexual mating, each cell a kaleidoscope of rudimentary search, perception, choice, of self-determining act, though this giant amoeba, hunting and ingesting a paramecium, bears the generic name of chaos. In existing slime molds, the amoeba goes social, reaches toward the metazoan. A spore in a moist place emerges, feeds, divides, a colony of free-moving protozoans. They exhaust the habitat. In a cluster, one secretes a crassin. As the signal touches others, they converge, secreting more. Like iron filings drawn to a magnet, eddies of cells swirl in, a slug that creeps, then sends a stalk into the air. Some dry into a stem for the common good, others turn to a fruiting body, others to spores. The head breaks, each seed amoeba bears the prefungoid whole. The social polyp proliferates into coral, advance that falls back as to sessile plant, almost to mineral, an undifferentiated one-many, yet they build a skeleton of limestone which makes them, as in the Great Barrier Reef, the most ponderous of living things. With the Cambrian seas, the fossil record known to Darwin begins. Invertebrates of all families, sponges, coral, jellyfish, worms, sea lilies, brachiopods, trilobites, ancestral in the great crustacean, scorpion, spider line, and among them overshadowed chordates, evolving to first fish. Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, then the Carboniferous. Over much of the earth, these swamps of great club mosses and tree ferns, our source of coal, spiders and insects, huge cockroaches and dragonflies, and again, just emergent from lungfish who had crept to land, then become amphibians, stegocephalian hardheads, the first true reptiles waiting their turn. And hardly have those sprawling reptiles, this herbivorous sail fin, appeared, when theriodonts in the Permian hoist up on 4 legs and differentiate dog-like teeth, giving rise by the Triassic to mammals. But as if each had to be tested by the tyranny of the past, mammals waited, through the Jurassic and Cretaceous, the surge of reptiles into every habitat. In the swamps, Brontosaurus, 70 feet long and weighing, say, 30 tons, while the ancestral possum cowered in the trees, though Brontosaurus was a plant-eater. And would Allosaurus have had time for anything as small as those mammals? When one stands in the New York Museum, where the 100-million-year-old skeleton still ravens over Brontosaurus, those Berkeleyan questions of external reality, whether science has invented a world from its own cognizance, no more arise than if the brute should take out after us. Never was more adaptive radiation, up into the air, back to the ocean. The inland seas of the last Cretaceous 60 million years ago swarmed with short and long-necked plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, while pteranodons glided above and swooped down for fish. Perhaps the active dinosaurs had already developed warm blood and a more efficient heart. By the Jurassic, the most beautiful of fossil forms had appeared, that toothed and feathered dinosaur birdlink called Archaeopteryx, found in the Bavarian limestone in 1861. Here, too, a step toward a later style was taken before the former had run its course. Over the final earth grab of dinosaurs, these birds, with primates, just held their own. Had they already begun to practice song? Though in soul, the toothed lizard bird must still be a long way from what nesting with its sacrifice brought to the eyes and musical throats, not to mention the migratory intelligence of our birds. Here the rufous fantail of Australia, caring for her young. The reptiles that survived the startling general extinction at the end of the Cretaceous are cold-blooded, sluggish, and primitive, relics of a state of being before that of the dinosaurs. Of course, we should preserve them in the swamps and bayous, but to go from this Permian reminder to the golden age of ancestral grazers, of cats and dogs, mild Miocene, is like coming to that paradise where painters, here velvet Bruegel, have brought together the birds and mammals nourished in familial care. And already they cooperate in perceptive packs and herds, wolves almost as Kipling made them, with the roots of law and justice, and their stirring language of cries, though surely they did not lie down with the lamb. And against the marine reptiles, how much the mammals returned to the sea fit the Greek myth of Arion, whom a dolphin carried to the shore. Who knows what that intelligence, a brain larger than man's and with more neuron connections, though free of manipular use and control, may hold in contemplation of ocean depths and soul's contours, how much express in a language as liquidly mysterious as the music of the humpbacked whale. While army ant workers groom the swollen queen, her body all fat and eggs, of which she can lay 100,000, for workers specialized in size and task, have they weirdly anticipated how our mammalian propinquity and property of blood must socialize? As late as 1910, Schroeder photographed these megalithic builders in Africa, the whole tribe with sled and roller logs, dragging a stone dolmen to the village for a monument. What self-renouncing frenzy of togetherness! Set up the monuments of prehistoric Europe, Stonehenge affected, as in the Nias photograph, by a population yoked into one by overmastering spirit, what we read of in Romanesque church building, nobles and all with yokes on their proud necks in orgies of penitential zeal. The Lord thy God is a consuming fire. In the Moslem world, penitents of all nations and tongues still convene at the Mount of Mercy near Mecca, reminder of the tornadic faith that roared through history, sweeping horsemen over Asia and North Africa and into Spain. Are these powers real, with the God visions and prophet texts that entrain them? As real as tornado, or the gene on which somatic building rides? Augustine and Pascal thought only Christianity had miracles. But miracle is the inner truth of every generating myth. Faith, like soul, is caught in the paradox of all energy, a configuration riding formaloid, which can always be analyzed away. These African tribesmen, with their image magic, know as well as Rotarians at the business of the day that what they have in hand is real. And what else, against entropy and natural decay, microbes and tropical parasites, holds those breathing dark bodies together, but cascades of mythic power, the very laws of nature, habits of matter? Thus Jung on the God and Devil loci in the group unconscious. There is nothing for it but to recognize the irrational as an ever-present psychological function, its contents, psychic realities, real because they work. To combine Cartesian outwardness with Blake's creative imagination where all deities reside is a task for the Superman. That means for each and all. Yet to see once, clearly and distinctly, the earth heaving into the 1,300-foot ambivalent snake shrine of the Adena Hopewell culture in 1000 B.C. Ohio, Christ, too, the snake Moses lifted on the rod, is to know that we have outlived that dry, single vision a patient of Jung's once expressed. Doctor, last night I disinfected the whole heavens with bichloride of mercury, but I found no God. If history is mythic and the word its catalyst, sweet science must embrace myth and word. When Blake thinks gins and poison, he sees spider, real as a black widow sliding on its web. We beheld the infinite abyss, the sun black but shining. Round it were fiery tracks on which revolved vast spiders crawling after their prey. Though like all, the spider is dual. Swift's caricature of the soul-spinning modern, which Whitman affirms, a noiseless, patient spider, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, O my soul. Has the complementarity of good and evil begun with us? To avoid the anthropomorphic is to avoid philosophy, since Anthropos too came up the stair where his art and knowledge, love and morality got their natures and their names. This Orissa devotee of Kali, swung through fire 7 times each way, is on the sublime sacrificial tree that leads from the lockjawed salmon, the bird feeding her young, through Greek tragedy and the paschal victim, to whatever mystery we enact in our crucifixion of the world. Oh, for a dialectic like Archimedes' lever! Sex has been the deepest cleavage in the creative one, well of ideal and gross, delight and pain. Here colon bacilli, electron magnified 100,000 times, erect from phallic supermale to round female, a comic kissing bridge for chromosomes. Now wherewith should he make his payment, if he ne used his saily instrument? So the wife of Bath, but Chaucer's Crusader says, who gave me drinker? Over the corpse-littered fields of Troy. Who has brought off that loved war like snails, where both are male and female, equal, hermaphroditic? They fuse, each shooting into the other, wounding and sperm-bearing calcareous darts. So they retire to gestate and lay eggs, a balance in the Amazonamachia, which has reduced males sometimes to parasitic captives, females to sessile breeding sacs. Or the tension can become Heraclitus' lyre. The male cricket, after fighting off others, rubs his wing covers, stridulating violins, vulnerable, since mate or predator may hear. He sings until she covers him, feeding on juices secreted by those musical wings. Human love was never more natural than in the Eros Kalos tradition of the Greeks, where sex, with all its dark roots in birth and death, to die with thee again in sweetest sympathy, mirrors the open gladness of Aphrodite. As with everything Greek, one wonders if civilization reached its acme in that prime. How much for later gains we risk and pay. True, the East has raised the Hellenistic pleasure to a nirvana rite, but the carved ecstasy leaves their multiplying billion in the lurch. And whatever dislocation has torn the Christian West, has wrenched natural desire to the Wagnerian and perverse, as post-romantic Berkeley's Triton blows his brooding conch over the waves, this Nereid fondles the sea beast super male. Such the Europe Freud found flooded with neurotic sex. What of the other of the love-death pair? Death in nature withers away, that flowing in and out the Stoics would make it, the fall and decomposition of a tree. As with force and counterforce, death needs its opposite, life consciousness. Against the Renaissance inflaming of the will to live, the converse outrage sharpens a dance of death. But the most macabre Holbein, or this Baldung Green, is Leibniz's perception, a breaking wave in what abides. Skelton. No man may him hide from death hollow-eyed, with his worm-eaten maw and his ghastly jaw. To whom, then, shall we sue? The death arts of Egypt still gaze through the change, and even this 19th century girl in Greenwood Cemetery, Brooklyn, wreathes the sadness of forever in a transience of leaves. Death comes to be in conscious being, its ground the I am, by which it is contained. Sail out, eidolon yacht of me. In the West, love-death took incarnate seat in the God-man, mediation of the yoked antinomies. When Ortega takes from an arroyo a branch where lignin striations record the stress and twist of cleavage, so that, as Heraclitus says, struggle becomes father of all things, and using these zygote swirls, shapes a Christ, he works the tension of nature to the symbolic sacrifice, racked from rock to sky for the song of men and angels. Who would praise the peace eternal must tune his harp in the war of its fibers. Such the archetype of our dynamic. A balanced antinomy is sterile, whether in thought or act. The one that holds antinomy becomes the arrow. So in Botticelli's mystical nativity of 1500, the foreground devils retreat, trampled, stabbed to the ground. Angels embrace mortals in imminent revelation. The good-evil rift is suspended in God, whose coming is past, future, and now. The spiral of time was never so implemented. The contradictions of Socratic reason were fused in the man-God. By the Renaissance, that faith containment is shifting to existence. Life itself begins to gather the polar fields. In Donatello's Christ before Pilate, the Janus-faced servant looks both ways as to Jerusalem and Rome. Is not the word double-mindedness quoted twice from James in the Mass of Donato's patron saint? Already the horns of dilemma are the strength and tragic flaw of the Christian mind. The myth of Lucifer applies to every spirit which can say, I am. Being, displaced from the center, can only act from its own center, initiating creative history. God had no way to operate but by granting freedom, which in evolution means the miscarriage of adaptive quest. The civilization which moved from Raphael's overthrow of Satan to Milton's near glorification, and then to the Promethean reversals of the age of revolution. Beethoven, Goethe's Faust, Blake, this Goya dream of flying. That civilization more than any other had risked the experiment of the new, leaping from progress by chromosomes to progress by the coup of law, equation, word. The wheel turned to an arrow, must turn again with the wheel. Perhaps in cosmic extension entropy rounds on itself, but the fountain we see is a form, the rise and apex of drops always curving to fall. To stop the gravity down would stop the universe. Anti-entropy must weave over that, using particular decay, until the entraining transcendence is itself entrained and used, where the fountain becomes a drop, curved in the greater rise, to which Pascal's not will always apply, seeing too much to doubt and too little to be sure. We of the modern West have felt the whole earth swerve. Spiders on psychedelic drugs weave strange romantic webs. No doubt they will catch fewer flies, carmina non dant panem. But weavers of the creative abstract might prefer this bold, free venture to the standstill of the old symmetry. Has not the Nietzschean West made a drug of the god self? Which Rimbaud literally applied. The poet makes himself a visionary through a long, immense, and reasoned derangement of all the senses. Startling how close to our center those 1920 drawings by Prinzhorn's schizophrenic patients strike. Like the atonal break of Mad Peter, Wozzeck, this Bartok miraculous Mandarin. We have read it in the nightmare fictions that have seemed most expressive of our age. Kafka's metamorphosis of man to huge cockroach, the penal colony with its religious torture machine. In art, there are the expressionists. This 1918 self-portrait by Soutine, 10th son of a Jewish tailor, painting in the exile of Paris, precursors of some world disease. But crisis and disease inseparable from the triumph of technocracy, man mastering the elements to whose wheel he was bound, here in a suit of aluminum and asbestos, become the salamander of fire, fighting a jet fuel inferno at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Here, beyond what Roger Bacon dreamed of, it is possible that devices can be made whereby a man may walk on the bottom of the sea or of a river. He sets up his Ondine hydrolab in the ocean depths. How to contain the ambivalence of such a Lucifer, since never have the sun-bright scales of armored supremacy more sonorously clanged on the logos of number than in the science where racked-out nature flames the certification of energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. That a civilization mediated by God crucified and preaching the humbled penitence of man, Augustine's dream of the boy dipping the sea into a pool on the shore, and when the saint said, "You can never hold the ocean in that hole," the boy gave the recurrent pride-abasing answer, "Nor you the eternal in your finite mind." That a civilization beginning there should come out at the other pole of the incarnate field, where the Jesuit father Teilhard de Chardin should write of science, while we contemplate what he implies, the double helix of DNA with the plasticities of the vertebrate skeleton. The dream upon which human research obscurely feeds is fundamentally that of mastering beyond all atomic or molecular affinities the ultimate energy of which all other energies are merely servants, and thus by grasping the very mainspring of evolution, seizing the tiller of the world. That assumption of the light-bearer was put to the test by the Second World War. It was soon clear how far evolution had shifted to organisms reared above man. An aircraft carrier in the electronic navy had a brain room distinct from the brain of anyone in command. Their radar sensings converge, thence guidance goes to the members, guns, and planes. But it was not clear how that higher organism related to Teilhard's Omega dream. As he closed the phenomenon of man, apocalypse was still there, from which only a spiritual remnant would be saved. In the automation since, the individual is more and more superseded, an eye, a brain, a hand, woven in the network of sensors, computers, and adaptive relays. The control chamber for the Apollo moon launch visibly confronts us with the nerve net of something hyperzoan, at the other end of which the messenger molecules of a new genetic and evolutionary leap put the first Earth footprints on the lava dust of the moon. Where such an organized success is possible, how is it that here most of humanity creeps like slime mold over the globe, no lower, like unorganized bacteria on an agar plate, poisoning themselves in their own wastes, whole populations seized by the oldest cancerous self-service to breed and burn, as in the forests of Chiapas we reel from the foretaste of what is occurring in all the great jungle basins, once the lungs of the earth. They say leaf-cutting ants are adapted to the balance of nature. One could have said the same before the hygiene bomb of the rotational agriculture of jungle-burning man. Those balances are lack of size or power. These leaf-cutters, millions per nest, can rip up a plot of jungle, lugging the pieces on defoliated runways for their underground fungus beds. It is Eden again, God risking earth fall by the freedom of quest. We see nature everywhere hung over violence, out of the warming of air and convection of clouds, the nourishing descent of water in the discreet drops of rain. We hardly know yet how it comes that those cyclonic 300-mile-an-hour winds form and hold their own over farmland, towns, and all. The nuclear burning of the stars, which lights whatever planets have life, is poised on instabilities. We do not have to explode the world. Nature can make bombs without us. This enormous eruption of gas, the Crab Nebula in Taurus, remains from a flaming supernova, observed by the Chinese in 1054 A.D. Through days of total release, they can give out more light than a whole galaxy of 1 billion stars. Though again birth pairs with dying, the solar system may have come from such an event. In the birth of tragedy, nature makes Raphael's Transfiguration a symbol of the Dionysian and Apollonian. Below, the shadowed earth strife of the boy possessed by demons. Above, the visionary unity of the radiant and floating divine, an eternal contention. In Civilization and its Discontents, Freud opposes eros and death. Like Empedocles, love and strife, though unlike the stern Greek, he finds temporal hope that eternal eros will put forth his strength so as to maintain himself alongside of his equally immortal adversary. Not surprising if, in our century, we have auguries of imperative convergence. The sciences, Whitehead, Jung, Teilhard de Chardin, gaping with the philosophic and mythopoetic, while poetry and fiction hunger for a world epos, an obligation which rests upon us, drawing us on. Yeats, the half-read wisdom of demonic images, suffice the aging man as once the growing boy. But what are the images by which art or vision can gather its world? Two works from 1904, oppositely aimed. Rodin's still voluptuous Oceanids, derived from the romantic synthesis of his Gates of Hell. Cézanne's last study of Mont Sainte-Victoire, rising over Arles. The sensuous transformed to the abstract triangles, planes, and squares of analysis. If those were poles, the task might lie between. As between the most reductive abstraction the thrust of the modern has brought us to, how incommensurate with what we seek, the plain or colored rectangles of so many of the avant-garde